Well, hi. Thank you so much for coming out on this slightly humid Saturday. It was a real labor of love, and I'm so excited we have the show because I go back with Cary and his work for, just 2 or 3 decades, not real long at all. And when I heard that the show was happening and that Anastasia had gotten it mounted, I was like, oh, we have to bring this here. And one reason is that, this is going to be a bold, big statement, but I consider Cary Leibowitz to be one of the most influential conceptualists on the planet, in that every time he shows his work, young artists are filled with possibilities of new ways of making art. And I see, he used to have I used to be in Boston, and then before that in New York, and I would always see particularly young grad students be like, wait, there's all of these things where I can send off to this company and get this thing made, and it'll be part of my work. Or I can go to like a craft place and make work this way. And he, generationally, when he came to the fore, it was a moment in which identity politics were a new thing. And his take on it, with this incredible humor and this persona, the Candyass persona that he created, is still one of those sort of most unique and richly fecund art creations of the last decades. So I'm so thrilled it's here with 300 plus objects in the show. I urge you to spend time with it because before the show, the work arrived here in Houston last week, I had spent a total of 6 hours in the show, 3 hours in San Francisco and 3 hours in Philadelphia, the first 2 venues. And when they were unpacking it, I'm like, wait, I've never seen this before. And there were a few things I, in fact, had not seen before, but most of it was there. Just there's so much stuff and so much information in the show. And I'm actually going to send my first question to Anastasia. Just talk about, can you tell me about the genesis for wanting to be the organizer of the first Cary Leibowitz retrospective?
Oh, sure. Like you, I agree that Cary is one of the most influential artists of his generation and one of the most influential conceptualist artists. Are you blushing? Blushing a little bit? Yeah. Okay.
I'm not paying.
I got to say something else.
I'm singing London Bridge in my head.
And Candyass is kind of an urban legend in the art world. Like, everyone knows who Candyass and Cary Leibowitz is in New York. And not only that, but everyone seems to have a Cary Leibowitz multiple. I mean, you find them in the most surprising places. And I think that about 99% of the city went to the Candyass Carnival when he did that at Stuck's Gallery in New York City. So when I was hired at the Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco, Cary was an obvious choice for the first show that I would do there. And I had known his gallerists, Risa and Ben, at Invisible Exports in New York City. And they really encouraged this and helped make it happen and kind of held our hands the entire process. So it was such a pleasure, and it's been on the road now for about 16 months. It opened in January of 2017 in San Francisco, and then it traveled to Philadelphia, and now it's here in Houston. So it's kind of hit all areas of the country, and it's really interesting to see how the audience shifts and reacts to the exhibition as it's traveled. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah. And Cary, there's the psychological effect of when someone calls up and says, I want to do a retrospective. Given your knowledge of the art world and how the art world functions and what retrospectives do, what was your first response when Anastasia said she wanted to do this?
No.
Yeah, I have to say that I didn't really believe it. I mean, not in like, oh wow, I don't believe it. I mean, more like, well, yeah, you've just got to be nicer and tell me more because I just don't really think this is an actual scenario. So, and I never planned for it, as you see the condition of a lot of stuff out there. Yeah, I don't know how many months we planned for it, but
Well, I remember that I had it booked and the board agreed and the funding was there, and they sent me to New York to convince you to just basically sign on the dotted line, and we sat in the gallery, and you had hung all the works on the wall behind him, and you just kind of sat there and you were like, okay, I'm on board.
Oh,
yeah.
all right, that's good.
And then we went full speed ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the having been to the Harlem townhouse too, I remember just doing a visit with you there and just seeing the amount of earlier shows that were sort of boxed up and needing to be uncovered. And when I saw that you were doing it, I'm like, oh, that's a very big job to organize all this material and get it all appropriately documented. But it's like the actually, I'm going to go up to the first slide, which is one of the earliest pieces in the show. And it's one of the emotional touchstones for me. And it's sort of when the persona of Cary Leibowitz, I mean, as someone who might be getting beaten up or abused or has colorful clothes. Can you tell me a little bit about the origin of this piece? And because I think of this as sort of part of the formation of the Cary Leibowitz persona.
Well, I think I'm always very self-conscious, whatever the scenario is. And I was younger then, and also before this, I was trying to make paintings that looked like they were cool paintings. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was exploring things. And, I like reading fiction, and I think I just sort of translated certain aspects of my daily life and figuring out things that I'm really neurotic about. Like I was in college and I didn't really want to walk down the street dressed up to get somewhere. Not that I was confronted with anything, but I was terrified that I would be.
When you'd moved from the Northeast to Kansas.
Yeah. So I think this just kind of sort of was catharsis of these sort of feelings, and when I did it, I was like, oh, this kind of feels more natural to me, and I think aesthetically was something more comfortable. I wasn't ever really comfortable with like making brush strokes and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
And this is on cardboard too. Could you talk about using the cardboard?
I use cardboard a lot. I never liked canvas, but I sort of like the object of cardboard, which then translated to using plywood, which became more of my first to go to medium for making a painting. There's just something very object-like about it, and maybe a little more approachable, like a for sale sign or a garage sale sign or something like that.
But so when you decided that to make language-based work, were you thinking Lawrence Weiner and the grand conceptual tradition, or were you more looking at folk art sites, or?
I don't think I knew Lawrence Weiner. I think I did like Barbara Kruger. I think it was probably a little bit of knowing like Jonathan Borofsky's dream paintings and Ray Johnson collages, a little bit of Barbara Kruger, Ed Ruscha, and also feeling very self-conscious about appropriating any of their aesthetics. So I was always very much about taking out, and I mean, in a lot of ways, you see my penmanship really hasn't changed much. And at one point, I thought about it for a while, like, oh, I can focus and make a much cleaner, more adult-like, but I thought, that just becomes precious and it slows me down, so I just kind of gave in and said, fuck it, just go with it. And that way I could just be fast, which I need to be sometimes. because if I give myself too much time, I might talk myself out of something. So.
One thing I was remembering last night was when you were first coming to prominence, there was that term abject art, and people were talking about the art of the abject with the Mike Kelly stuffed animal pieces and Katie Nolan's crushed beer cans on the floor, and you were lumped in with that movement, and
okay,
I was thinking because I was thinking Anastasia is a little younger than us, and might have, and it would have had a very different experience of this. Actually, how old? When did you first become aware of Cary Leibowitz as an artist?
Probably, I knew who he was, but I didn't become really involved in his work until we started talking about it. I think that your work makes it into kind of gay art anthologies. I mean, specifically the Candyass Carnival. It wasn't something I saw in an art history survey, but it was something I kind of came across in books. In addition to being lumped with abject, it was also lumped in with pathetic aesthetic.
Pathetic aesthetic, yes, that was
the title of a review of work included in, I believe, Art Forum in around 1990. Loser art was also a term that your work was kind of...
Yeah, I mean, there was a sort of I think a deep well that I was pushed into because I think in a lot of ways I wasn't, in the echelon of Mike Kelly or Katie Nolan, but then the gay community at the time was very upset with me having this very sort of maybe narcissistic, depressive aura.
Yeah.
It was much more of a focus on Grand Fury or Act Up, and much more of a positive.
The fierce warrior thing. Yeah.
Which I never really felt like I was part of a group. I think I still sort of a bit afraid of being part of a group, but so there was a little bit left out, which I couldn't really figure out at the time. I think because I was busy working on stuff, but I did sense something.
Well, you also didn't work in a traditional way. You created work for your exhibitions. Each exhibition really became its own installation. And you'll notice that there are distinct bodies of work in the exhibition, and usually they're the result of one specific exhibition that took place, which is kind of a really interesting aspect of your work.
Yeah, well, this whole everything out there, the traveling show was something to get used to in that respect too, because I really felt like I was cheating, that I wasn't making work for the show. Like digging up this old work in one way just felt, cheating. Like, I have a show, I've got to make new things. So.
And you did. You made a few things.
A few, yeah.
And continue to make things. When you showed up, I will maybe digress for the story of the brisket. That when I walked in to see the show in Philadelphia, there was a very big sculpture of Philadelphia cream cheese that he had added for the show. And I'm walking through there with their curator, Anthony, and I'm like, are they sending the cream cheese to Houston? Because Texas doesn't really have a lot of cream cheese aesthetic going on. And so I was talking to Cary about stuff, and he goes, well, do you want to show the cream cheese in Houston? And he's like, no, I'll make you a brisket. And the brisket was made on site. Now, so your face and persona was on the work from very early on. So that was part of the
I
period.
think it was a way of me breaking out in a way, because I was always very shy. So I think doing self-portraiture was, I think my, going back to Barbara Kruger, who I admire, but there was always a pointing the finger sort of aspect to her work that I didn't want to be a part of. Yeah. And I felt like I always should be putting myself on the line to sort of meet the viewer halfway, or even like 3/4 of the way. Yeah. So it's.
Well, I mean, even seeing that your chubby bar mitzvah photo on the umbrella stand, I'm like, I don't know how many of us could do that and put it out there and just be like so proud about it, and so, or not proud about it, but just so willing to share it.
Yeah. Well, I do like trash cans, so that part was self-indulgent.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I tried Googling and looking for images of the Candyass Carnival because I was there, and I remember it. And apart from Hunter Reynolds seems to have the most. He's got video of it, of his performance, all that. And when you Google Candyass Carnival, you basically get Hunter Reynolds websites. Can you talk a little bit about what that was?
It was at the pinnacle of my career, and I was being invited to do different shows, and so I was invited to do another one-person show, which at the time I just really didn't feel like I had that much to say that was worth filling up a whole gallery. And then I kind of got into this whole idea of questioning the one-person show, and like, well, why did I need to have a one-person show when I can just organize like a group show of my own? So I called it the Candyass Carnival and invited different friends that could have either a booth, or we did some collaborative multiples. I had a ice cream cart that I rented for the month, and we sold ice cream sandwiches, and but I had to. I felt like I had to participate with work too, so I made these sort of carnival signs, but I always felt the obligation to throw a little black cloud into everything. So for each kind of food item, cotton candy or whatever, there's also sort of a problem with the world. And I was also there every day. It's sort of like the self-portrait idea. I was there every day selling the thing. So it's kind of like, here I am, I'm putting myself on the line kind of thing. Yeah. So like showing up for work, doing my job, and
Well, when you ordered fried chicken for lunch yesterday, I just suddenly heard, in my head, heard the words being jealous of everyone. Oh. So, now, and this is one of the ones, and also for the images, I just picked sort of 15 ones that are like, that we can talk about different aspects of the show. This is the one that I put it on some of my social media this week, and I was amazed the amount of people going, that's me. It's all about me. It's like people think you're speaking for them, and that you've somehow connected with their persona. The youthful, like the young Cary, the Cary that's in the bar mitzvah photo, the teenage angst that runs through. Why the investigation of the teenage years and your formative years?
I couldn't get, just couldn't let go. I think that was the thing. But now lately when I watch some of these new movies out, I am suddenly feeling really old. I'm relating more to the parent than to the teenage angst-ridden main character. So maybe I've grown up, or maybe I've just gotten boring. I'm not sure, but I would say that my miserableness of 13 probably didn't get purged until I was 40. Yeah. So, but this is, I think, late 80s, and I always feel like anything I make, I have to be very sincere about. I'm trying not to speak for other people, even if I am in whatever other sort of mindset. And this just always felt like a heartfelt piece in a way. It's one of the few pieces I've kind of lived with in my house, because I just related to it. Yeah.
So since you were there for the first audiences coming into the show, did you have the conversations with public members about do people start telling you about their own lives when looking at Cary Leibowitz?
Absolutely. And not just young people, I mean people from all demographics. It's amazing how anyone can connect at the show. And we talked about this yesterday, about why there is so much work in the show, and you mentioned that it's so that there is something for everyone, or you wanted everyone to feel welcome in the show or be able to connect to an aspect of it. And I see that, people connect to different works, they overlook works that someone else is really drawn to, and it's really kind of amazing to just, oftentimes in San Francisco, I would sit in the gallery and just watch people walking through the show and how they were reacting. So it was really kind of wonderful.
Yeah. I was also noticing last night which ones people were taking selfies in front of, which is pretty much a vote of popularity these days in the art world, is which one is the person saying, I want to have, I'm not depressed anymore as my Facebook photo for the next month, and which is, they really want the world to know that they're not depressed anymore.
Mm-hmm. Or the stop copying me, those are a loud favorite.
Now, tell me about the origin of the I Love paintings.
Well, I had an architecture history. I started, growing up, I thought I wanted to be an architect, and I started at an architecture school and then quickly realized I didn't want to be an architect, and then I went around. But anyway, one of the first times I was having a show in New York, I just thought, oh, my work is so didactic, and I'm going to be crucified. They're going to say, oh, it's, I'm ripping off this person, that person. So I thought, well, I should just sort of put it all out there. So my idea was to make this sort of classical cornice sort of thing with the different artists. So that was what that was about. I haven't done it since then, so those pieces sort of are definitely not updated, but yeah.
Actually, it'd be funny to see you decide to go back and do I Love series 2018.
Yeah.
You have, in a way.
Oh.
With your homages, too. With your Fran Drescher, your Tondo, and your Greta Gerwig mittens, and your...
Yeah. Okay.
But you're not in the show.
Yeah.
But related to these paintings, one thing we did with the installation of the show is we referenced past installations. So these have always, in each iteration, these are always hung along the top of the wall. The carnival paintings are always hung in a grid. And the early works reference the early installations at Stuck's. The Pyramid of Trash Cans was from a 2005 installation that you did in New York City. So there's little references to all the past exhibitions that you've had throughout the exhibition.
Yeah. Well, also, one thing is very apparent is that your training in architecture and the idea of the spatial consideration. Because I can be honest with you in that the staff had severe anxiety about a 300 object show in our downstairs gallery. They're like, how the hell are we going to make that work? And we started last Sunday morning, and we had the basic layout of the show done by like 4 o'clock, and hearing, like, you knew exactly, like, we had decided where the walls would go, and then you were just like this, and there was so little indecision that it was kind of amazing. Like that it was not what you expect in a 300 object show.
Yeah, I think a lot of things I like to leave up to chance, or like I asked the crew to take care of certain hanging salon styles because I feel like I get a little rote if I keep doing it myself. So it's nice to let go a little and just say, put stuff on this wall. If it feels good, do it. And letting go a little, I think, is good for me, and I think good for the work too. Yeah.
And there are pieces that are hidden in strange places, like when you have to go into the bathroom. And then also, I love that the museum store just bleeds into the show too. Not San Francisco had probably the most. In the ICA, because they don't have a museum store, they had the least. They had the umbrellas. This is the one that's hidden. Right? It's like with the I Love paintings and this, your awareness of how you function in an art world is really conspicuous. That there is a sense of like you as being this sort of like mold, sort of like, in the system, knowing how the system works, and understanding the layers of sort of respect and how artistic greatness is codified. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the relationship of your much written about day job with your understanding of how your work functions in the world?
During the week, I receive a paycheck from an auction house, and I work there. And my specialty is prints and multiples. And but I sort of snowballed into the whole career from being somewhat of an obsessive collector, and I like my job, and most of the time, I'd say 96.6% of the time, maybe my dealer has different opinions. Ben, please stand up. That I can really separate my own art making and expectations from the art world, money, evaluating, self-esteem, all of that. So, but anyway, there's a small percentage when I can't, but I think most of the time I can. I think because I really do like other people's art, and there's a certain amount that I feel is very undervalued, and so it's very easy not to take things personally. There's also a lot of things that I'm not so crazy about that have a very strong market, and that also helps me realize that either my opinion's not worth anything, or that things change. And I've been doing it now for 20 years or so. So I've definitely seen the waxing, waning of various artists' popularity, and when certain works are being collected and when they're not. So, but I think generally my karma is pretty good about people making work, and hopefully it survives.
When we made the comparison, because famously Duchamp made his living by selling other people's work, and knowing how the market works. So when Duchamp's critiques of visuality and the types of normal art values, it was from this really knowledgeable perspective.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I mean, there is like that one wall of sort of art history commentary or references, the modern art paintings, and I guess that's a little bit of a keeping busy thing. It's not a fucked up junior high school gay boy painting, but it's it's a part of my life, and kind of playing with art history is. I mean, painters have been referencing past paintings for 500 years, but I still get a little self-conscious of it.
Yeah. This is actually one of my favorite pieces in the show, just because it's so succinct. And can you talk a little bit about the strategy, how you make where you find these photographs, how you decide to put the text on them?
Yeah, well, I guess this is from the mid-'90s or so, and I used to be able to go to flea markets much more often than when there were flea markets. And, I just find these kind of 8x10 photos. Now I search them out more on eBay, but yeah, it was just this kind of thing of, getting out my Sharpie and playing with things. And I kind of go through phases where I pump a lot of stuff out, and then it just kind of ends up being a pile, and it gets buried. And so I hadn't done any of these things for a super long time, and then this show happened, and people reacted well to it, and of course I'm just like, oh, I could make more. So I started making more, playing with 8x10s again, and there's the the
Marcel.
Yeah, the Marcel's Cowboys. Yeah, I've been playing with this label maker stuff lately, and yeah, I think I just react a lot to positive or negative feedback. So.
Yeah. What is very true is there's a group of 5 cowboys that this was what he arrived for Houston with, and they're all celebrated Marcels from the history of modernism. So Marcel Broders, Marcel Breuer, Marcel Marceau, the mime,
Marcel Duchamp, and Marcel Proust.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh. But what's great is it's all the same cowboy, and
yeah.
So the heroic Marcels. And also, one of my favorite series is the Modern Art series. Can you talk about how you install them in the original show? It's a little different here, and what the origin of the pieces is.
The origin was that I was finding, like from leftover scraps other people were tossing out, these odd shapes. And so kind of going in that 20th century Jean art tradition, suddenly they become modern art. What was fun at the San Francisco show was there was this funny wall with a thermometer, thermostat in the middle. And I was like, oh, that's where the modern art painting should go, just because it was such a dumb wall to begin with that it was easy to play things around it.
Yeah, they weren't hung with the photographs in the first iteration. We had them kind of hung next to each other.
Yeah, it wasn't until here. It didn't really occur to me to mix them up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and actually that's a strategy that runs the whole show, one body of work and then an entire other body of work, like the pink paintings with the pie chart paints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've always made these very strict rules for myself at times, even though it doesn't look like I have any rules. I do give myself these very weird, strict rules that I'm orthodox about at times, but...
and I think that comes through in the catalog. If you look, they're separated into very distinct bodies of work that you determined, really, the conversation pieces, the boat pieces, the ceramics, the pink paintings.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing is you'll take a pun, you'll take a joke, and you'll use it on a painting in 1987, and then you'll repeat it in 2005, and it's almost impossible to tell the passing of time in these works. And you'll see that in the show. You won't be able to tell which works are from which time period. So really the dates don't matter all that much in the work because they are kind of timeless in that sense.
Yeah, I'll go with your interpretation. I wish I could, advance more, but
Actually, can you talk a little bit about when you're working curatorially with an artist where humor is one of the main factors? Like there's straight up jokes in Cary's work, and the thing about humor is that a joke where nobody laughs is also this kind of incredibly poetic thing. And I know with your curatorial work in general, is there an attraction to humor, and have you thought about the way humor functions in art discourse?
Well, I think what you said about a joke where no one laughs, that has kind of been a through line in a lot of the shows I've curated, specifically with Ray Johnson. A lot of times the jokes, either they go over someone's head or they just don't think they're funny, and then 5 minutes later you'll hear a chuckle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of something that happens with your work, too. Or when I curated a show of Bridget Berlin's self-portraits, I found those hilarious. I'm not sure if anybody else thought they were funny. This obese woman taking self-portraits of herself, like covered in body paint, dressed like a mermaid. But this kind of dark humor, this dark wit, this really dry wit, it's really interesting to try to put that into a space. And with Cary, to put so much of it into an exhibition, that does something, too. Just having joke after joke after joke, and to watch how people will read something and move on to a completely different, theme, and see how they then react when they're overwhelmed with so much humor. But the jokes have layers, and Some of them are one-liners. Sorry, I had broccoli for lunch. But then there are much more complex works that kind of reveal themselves slowly over time. And one of the beautiful things about the show that you mentioned was that sometimes I see things in the show and I'm like, that wasn't here before. And that's impossible because I made the checklist. But, either that or you snuck some things in. But you see things with fresh eyes, and oftentimes they mean different things depending on how you're feeling that day or an experience you had the past week. So it's been a wonderful pleasure to curate the show and, you know, let it reveal itself over time.
Yeah. Well, one of the laugh out loud moments for me is a similarly shaped piece of wood to this, which looks like a lot of great monochrome painting. You painted monochrome red and just labeled it as Ellsworth Kelly's Butthole, which is, in my mind, just like it's totally juvenile humor, but it's the type of thing I would say walking through an Ellsworth Kelly show and be like, and like my friends would find it funny, but nobody else would, and I would never write it down in public. And there it is, sort of on the wall as like Ellsworth Kelly's Butthole.
Yeah, I guess I'm. That's where my bravery comes in. I mean, yeah, I think staying on the dumb side of things has kept me going in a way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could compete with the Smarties. So,
Yeah. When we were in it's on the show, this is also where we used a lot of our kids' programs are in here. And the pointy painting that says, "I see your point," strikes me as the type of joke I would have repeated endlessly when I was 8 years old. Yeah. So I thought like 8-year-olds would definitely be like the prime audience for that piece.
Well, I hope Andre gets it too.
We had tours of kindergarten age children through the exhibition in San Francisco, which our education team was a little bit apprehensive about at first, but then some teachers wanted to take their kids into the show because they loved Cary's work so much. And actually I think they got more out of the show than any other demographic. I mean, bright colors, like they would say, oh, it's like a candy store, it's a carnival, and they could pick out certain words, and it was just amazing to see how they could connect to it.
Yeah, one friend brought a couple of her, like, maybe 6 and 9-year-old daughters to Philadelphia, and the girls thought they were so cool because they got to see, words they're not supposed to say out loud.
Yeah. I have to ask about the use of and the making of these multiples. When Anastasia was saying before about finding Cary Leibowitz multiples in everywhere. And like I know having I used to live in Boston, so I'd always go to Provincetown, and there's like one of the better galleries there, Albert Merola, always had this like rack of multiples, and I would see people who were not art people just feel compelled to get a sissy football or a belt buckle. The belt buckles that we have in sale here too, as well as the footballs. The braveness of these distribution strategies. One of the ones that I bought years ago that I still love is a winter scarf that says "I heart Andy Warhol piss paintings," which is funny because if you wrap it around your neck the wrong way, you just get the word "piss" on the side of your neck, and people on the subway in New York look at you really funny. Can you talk? What is the first mass-produced multiple you did, and do you keep finding new technologies?
I think the first one I did was just like a business card. I lived in near a place where there was a printer that advertised they did business cards and wedding invitations and things. So I thought to do some business cards. And I think it just snowballed from there as far as like doing objects. I mean, this was all kind of pre-internet. So you'd get these great catalogs and they'd be very seductive of what to do. And I've learned over time I need to keep it really simple. So my technologies haven't changed too much. It's more or less, I've adopted the coffee mug a lot. And it's a good format for me for text. I think more of my so-called poetry is on a mug. You know, I get to pick out a nice font, although lately I've also limited the font to just whatever it's called, but I just keep it very clean. Yeah, I'd love to do more. Sometimes when I see artists that were invited to do something elaborate or expensive, I'm totally jealous. But you know, for a while I was doing the belt buckles, and getting them cast from this foundry. Those yarmulkes were kind of an early 90s sort of format that sort of translated well to different contexts. Lately it's been more mugs, I would say. Maybe...
the umbrellas.
Oh, yeah, so I did the umbrellas fairly recently. And that's
what was the origin of the umbrellas?
Well, Simon, my partner, current husband, we got married 2 years ago. So we got married and we decided we were going to do it outside at our place in the country. And we decided, well, you know, we have to risk the idea of rain. So I thought, well, I'll make umbrellas. And so I, like on Alibaba, I could find these places in China that make these sort of umbrellas. And then we had stencils, and I started spray painting them. And I didn't realize people would like them as much as they did, but and I thought they came out really well. So then I thought, oh, for this traveling show, I'm going to make new umbrellas. And so that's the parasol / umbrella.
And one of them is the Candyass elevator? Escalator.
Yeah. Well, it's just sort of I think of a certain amount of these banal statements that I do as, I mean, they're repetitive, and I would say that there's a punchline, but there's also a formality to them. So the Candyass Escalator Repair Company, to me, sort of works the same way as Sorry I Had Broccoli for Lunch or Joan Collins Has a Headache, you know, so... these were multiples. I called them the Depression Pennants, and then a few of them stitched together to make these formal tondos.
Like mandalas of misery?
Yeah. But they originally were just formatted. You know, you'd get the 4 triangle pennants that you could hang any way you want.
And at the same time, you also made pennants that said "Go Fags" and "Homo State,"
yeah,
which have become quite collectible.
Yeah, well, going back to what I was complaining about earlier, so I think there was a certain amount of the gay community that was really upset about the adoption of those words in like 1988.
Yeah.
So I kind of was happy with it, but then I became very self-conscious of it. But yeah.
I've been reading a lot of the biographies of particularly ACT UP and activist stuff. I just finished reading Avram Finkelstein's After Silence, which is a brilliant book, but it's being reminded about how fierce those fights were at the time, particularly in the context of AIDS activism. And then also the documentaries about ACT UP, and realizing that there's fights from 40 years ago that people, because now there's new media to talk about them in, are really, it's as if they happened yesterday. And there's a whole series of lesbian ceramics.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that happened?
Well, you know, it was just a happenstance that was really kind of a pure pleasure, and you know, I always shop in dollar stores and flea markets back then, and I suddenly realized these new figurines were, you know, the faces were made by one person in a way, and they were always very feminine, and sometimes even, you know, both figures had a bun, and to me they always just, they looked like same-sex couples more than a man and a woman. So I just started writing on them as found multiples, study for a portrait of 18th century lesbian couple. So we have that one case out there, and like a day or two before the San Francisco opened up, they had some sort of little event, and there were these little disco balls as decoration on tables, and I was like, oh, this is this is perfect. Now the lesbians can like have a disco ball hanging from there, so they look like they're in a little bit more of a party now. Yeah.
Well, and one of the and this was an installation decision you two made together, that each of the ceramic cases where an object could look really precious and beautiful, they're all crammed, and they're deliberately crammed. And that's not how those of us who go to school to become curators are taught to do things. Was it a big jump for you, Anastasia, to like cram that many together?
No, the installation's actually a reference to the show that Cary had in Paris in 1992, and the ceramics were installed in a case, all jammed together and even stacked up on each other. And the registrar at the Jewish Museum said, oh no, we can't stack them like that, but we could lay them out in these long cases. So that was kind of how we came to the decision to crowd them in like that.
Yeah, I mean, I still like it. I mean, I think it goes just back to my immediately attracted to, the dollar table at a flea market or a garage sale.
You were opposed to the plexiglass covers at first.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
was-
the covers, there is a stiffness about them that is weird. I like that, like we were able to just push pin the little pieces of paper to the wall without protection. And it's funny because a couple of the cases didn't, had a couple of mishaps along the way, so there were a couple of cracks when they arrived here. So I like that now we were able to put the Hello Kitty Band-Aids on them to kind of take the preciousness off the plexi.
Yeah. No, it's like a show like yours is registrar's nightmares, because there's so much stuff that is not done right, but it's kind of like part of it. It's part of the appeal. And I also think "Faggy Faggy Boom Boom." This I wish I could get as a T-shirt.
Yeah.
I think I would probably get lots of people being friendly to me.
Yeah.
Initially, I wanted to put this on the front of the museum, but that did not end up happening.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny when we were working on the poster for the outside, and I feel it was, I think, your decision to go with Epiphany Now, which is kind of the most poetic and open-ended of that. Is that a favorite one of the pink paintings, or?
I think I was thinking fast. I think somebody sent me a maquette for "Do These Pants Make Me Look Jewish?" and I didn't really want that, and so I was just thinking fast. I mean, and I also am always slightly filled with trepidation about being rude. Mm-hmm. So I usually wouldn't push buttons and say, like, I insist on "Faggy Faggy Boom Boom," So,
Yeah. And stop copying me, being like, because of course with the show being here, one of the things is there's going to be young Houston artists who are going to be copying you soon. They're all going to be going to the ceramics stores and like doing the.
Well, I hope they have better luck with it than I have.
Okay.
So,
Now, also, one last question is this: that the show feels more political to me now, given the climate, and to have the new coffee mugs and the painting that says "Respect for the U.S. Constitution" is a turn on, and how does external world politics affect the way you see the work today, the work functioning today?
Well, I think institutions like this become a bastion, and so I in a way, I am literally honored to kind of be part of the pilgrimage when people decide to come to places like this. So I feel like I'm cheating a little, that I'm preaching to the choir versus like going out and making some sort of political stand on the other side of town. But I think, we all do things in our own small way. The Constitution was something that just kind of evolved in the last, I'd say, 6 months or so, that painting, and I've been making it a lot. Or, you know, I was really empowered by watching the Parkland kids, you know, just build up their whole momentum. And so,
And there's pieces about that in the current gallery show in New York, or
and
the
that
one
just
that
really happened days before that show opened. But I feel like one of my best pieces in that show is Emma Gonzalez crossing the Delaware.
Yeah.
Which, of course, you had done before with the Washington crossing the Delaware,
Yeah.
Judy Garland crossing the Delaware.
Well, I forgot about Judy Garland until we were setting her up. Yeah. But yeah, so I think yeah, I think there's always a little bit of politics, just because you know, I'm an adult who knows a little bit of what's happening around me, but I also kind of know I don't know a lot, and so I don't really want to make a lot of noise or a lot of statements that might not be as informed as I should be. So.